The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as people filed into the benches. Marble pillars lined the edges of the hall, and above the judge's seat, the words, "In justice we trust," were carved in solemn stone. But justice, on that particular morning, wore a smirk. Judge Franklin Mercer, a stern man in his late 50s, leaned back in his chair inspecting the docket. His reputation was as cold as the bench he presided over. He had a history of dismissing people based on appearances, especially those who didn't walk in wearing designer suits or speak with calculated legal eloquence. And when he saw the next defendant on the list, case number 2871, Tyrone Ellis, age 17, he rolled his eyes. A thin boy stood quietly at the defendant's table. He wore second-hand clothes, a gray hoodie over a faded shirt, and sneakers that had seen too many miles. His curly hair was slightly unkempt, and his eyes darted around nervously, or so it seemed. Judge Mercer cleared his throat. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "Another high school dropout here to waste the court's time?" Laughter trickled from the gallery. A few attorneys snickered behind their legal pads. Tyrone didn't flinch. He looked up and said nothing. "Where's your counsel?" Mercer asked. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," the judge chuckled. "Representing yourself? In this court? Is that supposed to be a joke?" Tyrone spoke evenly. "It's not a joke. It's a right." Gasps circled the room. The bailiff leaned over and whispered something into Mercer's ear. The judge's eyebrows rose for a moment, but then he scoffed. "Let's proceed," he said. "This won't take long." The case, on paper, was simple. Tyrone had been arrested for trespassing and alleged theft at a local tech company's property. The police claimed he had broken into the building's server room with an unauthorized device late at night. What they didn't know, yet, was that Tyrone had done so to prevent a data breach after discovering a massive vulnerability in the company's system. He had written to them 3 times, warning them. They ignored him. Now he was here, not just to defend himself, but to stand for every kid labeled a criminal before being heard. Tyrone approached the podium, carrying a simple manila folder. No fancy briefcase, no laptop, just a boy with truth in his voice and fire in his eyes. "I'd like to begin by submitting Exhibit A," he said calmly, sliding a document to the clerk. Judge Mercer leaned forward. "What is this?" "A letter I wrote to Echelon Tech's security division dated 3 weeks before the incident. In it, I clearly described the system vulnerability I later entered the building to patch. You'll see it's time-stamped, signed, and ignored." The courtroom quieted. "And what expertise do you have in computer security?" the judge asked, sarcasm thick. "I've completed 7 online certifications from MIT's open coursework. I wrote my first encryption tool at age 13. I'm also the anonymous author behind the encryption patch Echelon used last year, the same one they profited off without crediting its origin." Judge Mercer paused. He glanced at the bailiff, who blinked and whispered again. "But you're 17, the judge said. "Yes, that's why they didn't listen," Tyrone replied, eyes steady. A quiet ripple went through the courtroom, this time not of laughter, but disbelief. Tyrone turned toward the gallery. "Your Honor, I didn't break into that server room to steal anything. I broke in to prevent a cyber attack that could have compromised over 40,000 users' personal data. And I have the logs to prove it." He pulled out USB drives and documentation, each labeled and color-coded. "You can verify all of it. The breach was real, and I stopped it." Mercer narrowed his eyes. His confidence was cracking, but his ego wasn't ready to yield. "You expect this court to believe you know better than security professionals, lawyers, and executives combined?" Tyrone hesitated. Then he did something unexpected. He turned toward the audience and said, "May I tell you something about my mom?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a place for sentiment." "It is," Tyrone said, voice firm. "Because truth isn't just found in evidence, It's found in motive, in humanity. Judge Mercer, slightly caught off guard, gave a reluctant nod. Tyrone was 9 when his father walked out. His mother worked 2 jobs, waitress by day, night custodian by night. She taught him never to lie and always to protect others when he could. When she lost her job after a hospital data leak compromised her records, Tyrone sat at the computer every night, trying to understand how it happened. By age 10, he was learning Linux. By 12, he built security software for community clinics. Not for money, for justice. Back in court, Tyrone continued, "I wasn't trying to prove I was smart. I was trying to do the right thing, and I ended up here because I looked like someone easy to blame." That last sentence struck like a hammer. People in the audience leaned forward. Judge Mercer looked down. For the first time that morning, he had nothing to say. The courtroom was hushed, not from fear, but from the dawning sense that something important was unfolding. What began as a routine juvenile case had transformed into a stage for moral reckoning. Tyrone stood tall, no longer just a teen defending himself, but a symbol of how easily society dismisses brilliance when it doesn't wear a suit or come from privilege. Then the courtroom door opened. An older black woman walked in, her shoes soaked from rain. She was dressed simply, a worn coat, hair pulled back. Her name was Angela, Tyrone's mother. She had just come from her night shift. Tyrone's eyes softened when he saw her. "Hi, Ma," he whispered. Angela sat down in the gallery, folding her hands tightly in her lap. She didn't say a word, but her presence changed the air. It was like truth had entered the room, quietly and without apology. Tyrone turned back to the judge. "I may not look like the lawyers you're used to, but I know the law. I studied it. I live by it. And I believe in it, even when it doesn't believe in me." He then held up a document, an independent evaluation from a law professor at NYU, who reviewed Tyrone's legal arguments and deemed them more ethically grounded and structurally sound than most third-year law students. "I didn't come here to escape punishment," Tyrone said. "I came here to ask this court to be what it claims to be. Fair." The judge looked at the document. The signature was real, the credentials were real, and slowly the walls Mercer had built around himself began to crack. He took off his glasses. I may have misjudged you, young man," he said, voice quieter. Tyrone nodded. "I know, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to prove that sometimes people just need to be seen." At that moment, a man in a dark suit stood from the back row. It was Professor Tyrone James, one of the top legal minds in the state. He had come after receiving Tyrone's email, intrigued by the teen's logic. "Your Honor," Harlan said, "I'd like to offer Tyrone a full scholarship to our accelerated pre-law mentorship at NYU, if he's willing." Gasps. Judge Mercer looked up, stunned. Tyrone blinked. His voice shook. I'd be honored, sir." Professor James nodded. "You've already proven your mind. Now let's show the world what it can do." Judge Mercer sat silently, taking in the shift of the moment. He turned to Tyrone one final time. "This case is dismissed," he said. "Not because of your intellect, but because of your integrity." Tyrone closed his eyes. Angela wept silently in the gallery, her pride immeasurable. The courtroom. Applause. As the gavel hit the block, applause broke out, not loud, but firm, respectful. Tyrone didn't smile, he just looked at his mother, then at the judge. Not loud, but firm, respectful. Tyrone didn't smile. He just looked at his mother, then at the judge, not with victory in his eyes, but peace. Outside, the rain had stopped. The day after the trial, news of the courtroom incident swept across social media. Cell phone footage captured by someone in the gallery had gone viral, showing a young black teenager calmly dismantling a courtroom's prejudice with intelligence, grace, and undeniable legal mastery. Headlines read, "Teen defends himself in court. Outsmarts judge with Harvard-level precision." Genius in a hoodie. Tyrone James, 17, stuns legal community. Tyrone never asked for fame, but it came anyway. His story made the rounds not because he won a case, but because he held a mirror to society's face, forcing everyone to question what they see when a young person of color enters a courtroom, or any room. Within a week, NYU Law's dean formally invited him to join an early mentorship program. Emails flooded his inbox. Civil rights groups, scholars, community leaders, even Hollywood producers wanting to adapt his story. The day after the trial, news of the courtroom incident swept across social media. Cell phone footage captured by someone in the gallery had gone viral, showing a young black teenager calmly dismantling a courtroom's prejudice with intelligence, grace, and undeniable legal mastery. Headlines read, "Teen defends himself in court. Outsmarts judge with Harvard-level precision." Genius in a hoodie. Tyrone James, 17, stuns legal community. Tyrone never asked for fame, but it came anyway. His story made the rounds not because he won a case, but because he held a mirror to society's face, forcing everyone to question what they see when a young person of color enters a courtroom, or any room. Within a week, NYU Law's dean formally invited him to join an early mentorship program. Emails flooded his inbox. Civil rights groups, scholars, community leaders, even Hollywood producers wanting to adapt his story. But Tyrone stayed grounded. He still walked his little sister to school, still bought groceries with his mom, still visited the old community center where he used to read books late at night under flickering lights. Judge Mercer's redemption arc. Meanwhile, Judge Mercer, a man once seen as impenetrable, faced mounting pressure to resign. But instead of stepping down, he chose to step up. He invited Tyrone and Professor James for a private meeting. This time, Mercer listened. "I made assumptions," Mercer admitted. "Not just about you, Tyrone, but about the system I've served for 30 years. I want to do better." With Tyrone's input, Mercer launched a judicial awareness initiative titled Courtroom Humanity, Training for Empathy in the Bench. Tyrone was made the inaugural youth advisor. The judge's public apology at a citywide press event went viral too, but not because it was flashy, because it was real. Tyrone's actions sparked more than trending hashtags. They inspired real change. Across the country, youth-led legal education clubs started forming in underserved schools. Scholarships were created in Tyrone's name for aspiring students from low-income communities interested in law. Judges across states began mandatory training to examine implicit bias and courtroom decorum. And most importantly, thousands of teens began to see themselves differently, not as statistics, but as voices. 6 months later, Tyrone stood on the steps of the same courthouse where everything changed. A crowd gathered, students, teachers, even law officials. With the city mayor present, Tyrone was awarded the Civic Courage Medal. He stepped up to the mic, adjusting his simple black jacket. "I didn't win because I was smart," he said. "I won because I refused to stay silent. Because somewhere along the line, I realized dignity isn't given by a courtroom. It's carried with you. And today, I stand not as a victim of the system, but as someone who believes I realized dignity isn't given by a courtroom, it's carried with you. And today, I stand not as a victim of the system, but as someone who believes we can rewrite it. Together." Applause thundered. Reporters wiped their eyes. Angela, his mother, stood in the front row, beaming with silent pride. That night, Tyrone opened a handwritten letter that arrived without a return address. "Dear Tyrone, I watched your trial. I'm a judge in Chicago. Your words changed how I see my role. I had forgotten what justice felt like until I watched you reclaim it. Thank you for reminding me. For reminding all of us. An old man trying to be better. Tyrone folded the letter, placed it in a box with a single label, "Why I Won't Give Up." And as he turned off the lights and looked out at the city, he knew this was just the beginning.